thank you guys so much for coming today. I'm excited to see what's going to happen today and all that kind of thing. If you haven't already yet registered into the Kahoot game, the code is on the screen right now, 4891244. So if you guys want to join, I would highly recommend. You are not going to be able to do well in this AP exam unless you practice the content at hand, and the easiest way to do that is by jumping this Kahoot, which I already took the time to make and things like that. So I would highly encourage, if you're sitting in the audience, please either open a new tab or go and find another device and type in that code. That will be super, super helpful. Not only for me, but more so for you, so that you guys can understand. The content and what's going on and things like that. So we're going to start in probably another 5 minutes here, give people some more time to join and join the Kahoot room. And after that, then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, welcome to the first ever live APUSH webinar that I'm going to be doing. Super excited to kick this off. I do know that this time I think we're finally going to be able to make it work. Unfortunately, I can't stream on YouTube because my user basis on YouTube is so... my channel's not popular enough on YouTube, and so I get red flagged by YouTube, and then YouTube just shuts me down. So unfortunately, I have to do it on Twitch, which I know is not the best spot for academic content. But hey, it'll be better than nothing, and it'll get the job done, thankfully. So we're going to be doing it on Twitch from now on. And I'm still going to have my normal videos on YouTube and things like that. So we'll still be having YouTube videos and things like that I will... And I'll still... Like, I'm recording this right now. This recording will go on my YouTube channel as well as a webinar that you guys can watch afterwards. So it's not like you're missing out because you're not here live, though it is obviously better if you are here live. So if you're here live, thank you for showing up. Seems like we still only have one player in our Kahoot room, which is fine. If only one person wants to practice, that's okay. But again, if you guys want to join, the game pin is 4891244. I bet I can maybe put that in the chat. So Kahoot game pin, and I said that was 4891244. So if you want to go ahead, and I put that in the chat, if you want to go ahead and join that Kahoot game, if it's possible to join in the middle, that would be awesome. And if not, that's okay too. While people are going ahead and getting started, while people are going ahead and still trying to work their way in here and log into this Kahoot room, I think one thing I'm going to say before we get started is there's a couple things I should say. One, if you're going to watch this and play at the same time, I recommend you're doing that on 2 devices. I just feel like that's the easiest. So on the first device, I would recommend being a computer, and on a computer, you should be viewing the stream. That way, you have as big enough screen as you need to read the question, read all the answer choices, and go from there. And the second thing, and then the second device should be your phone. The second device should be your phone, which you'll be able to use to click the answer choices. The second thing I should say is try and do this without your notes, if you can, without your textbook or study guides or notes or anything like that. Because the less you can use your notes, the more reliable that you are going to. The more you have, you can really know how much you know up here. I understand that it's going to be open note on the AP exam, but you're not necessarily going to get to use your notes on the AP exam. I mean, you will, but it's going to be a lot harder to, simply because, well, you're going to be having to try and write a DBQ in 45 minutes. You're not really going to have time to cross-reference with your notes. So keep that in mind. The last thing I'm going to go ahead and say is, sorry, I'm trying to do multitasking here at the same time. So try and do it without your notes. Try and view it on 2 devices. The last thing I'm going to say is make sure you have paper and pencil to be taking notes if you're interested in taking notes. Because while I said that you are going to be allowed to use notes, and so I recommend any notes you take during any of these webinar sessions you use on the AP exam. My tip is that you make a separate notebook or a separate binder where you put your notes for reviewing for your AP exam in, and put little dividers so that you know, which notes go with what time period. That way you can flip right to your notes on a certain time period and find specific information if you need to cross-reference for some evidence beyond the documents or something like that. So yeah, be taking notes. If you're watching this live, thank you for watching live and contributing to the game. If you're not watching live, I still would recommend that you try and answer these questions on your own. Write down the answers on a separate piece of paper and see the answer displayed on the screen. Because, again, I really do think that you're not going to be able to do well in this exam unless you practice. And I understand that there's not going to be multiple choice on the AP exam, but multiple choice is a great way for you to understand if you really, truly know the content at hand. And so I highly, highly encourage you guys to try and do these multiple choice, whether you're watching it live or whether you're not watching it live. Do everything you can to answer these questions, because these questions really are going to see if you really know the content or if you're just BSing your way through this. So we're going to be covering the years 1820 to 1865 in today's online lecture. My hope is starting now, we won't be longer than an hour, but, you know, we'll see what happens. I have 15 questions that each take a minute, and I plan on talking after each question, explaining the answer choices, because I feel like explaining the answer choices is going to help me teach and cover the content that we're supposed to be covering today in today's online little room thing. And I just realized that it might be kicking... Oh, never mind. Never mind. I lied. Don't listen to what I just said. It's not kicking people out. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to... Also, if you guys are interested, the music I was playing before that, this is Math YouTube channel that I watch called 3 Blue, 1 Brown. Excellent. If you're interested in math, it's an excellent channel for you to watch if you're interested in math and that kind of thing. But he has really awesome, good music in his channel, and that was the music I was playing while we were waiting to get started here. And it's the music I will play instead of playing the Kahoot music. I'm going to play that music in the background because I think it's actually super cool music to listen to and things like that. And good for, you know, just ponder music and that kind of thing. So you'll be hearing that throughout. And if you're interested in listening to that music, go ahead and check out the channel 3 Blue, 1 Brown, and you can hear that music in the background. Or you can search on Spotify for Grant Sanderson, and you'll see that music as well. Okay, I think I've got everything I need to say said before we got started here. So I think now what we can do is we can go ahead and we should be able to go ahead and get started now. So I'm going to go ahead and switch modes here to this mode. And I'm going to put this in full screen. And then maybe shrink my camera a little bit so that I'm not obtrusive to the question and things like that if you're not watching live. I think we're ready to go ahead and get started here. So hopefully you have paper and pencil ready to take notes. And you are... actually, hold up. Actually, first things first, real quick. I need to do a couple things. I need to... why is that not working? Uh-oh. There we go. I need to put this over here. And then... Okay. There we go. And then put this back in full screen. All right. Okay. I think we're ready to go ahead and get started here. I'm sorry if I'm drinking a lot and that bothers you. My mouth's pretty dry today, and I'm trying to keep my voice healthy. Especially when I'm not singing. I'm a singer, and I'm not really singing a lot, and so I want to make sure I'm well hydrated and that kind of thing. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to go ahead and click start so that we can see the first question. And for those that are not watching live, I'm going to wait to reveal the answer until we have seen all of until the 60 seconds has gone up, so that way you have time to think about the question, read the answer choices, and things like that. So without further ado, I think we're ready to go ahead and get started. I'm stalling, I am that kind of thing, but I think it's time for us to go ahead and get started. So here we go. Our first question. What was the effect of the Panic of 1819? When I was going to mute, I was going to... Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh, that's right, because that's on. Uh-oh. That's not good. I just wanted to mute the sound. That's all I wanted to do. Okay. There we go. So what was the effect of the Panic of 1819? Unfortunately, you don't have much time, so if you're watching this not live, you can pause and things like that. But for now, let's go ahead and play the music. All right, so there we go. There was the first question there. So the question was, what was the effect of the Panic of 1819? And let's talk about all the answer choices. So the Panic of 1819, I know I said the years are from 1820, but this is very important, especially when we get to the industrialization in the U.S. and labor movements and that kind of thing. So let's go through all of the options and talk about why they're correct and incorrect. First off, green is a quick one that we can eliminate immediately. Force manufacturers to switch back to the putting out system. That is actually outdated. And outdated, I mean in that it was happening earlier in the 19th century and wasn't... it happened before the Panic of 1819, so obviously it wouldn't be an effect that occurs afterward. That was fixed. The putting out system, the idea behind that was that merchants would sell tools to families. Families would make the products, and then so families, individual households would be making the products and the textiles, and not big factories. That was the idea behind the putting out system. Obviously, we know that after this we have factories and things like that in place, so that obviously can't be an option. Costs. Now, each of these options changed the international economy following the Napoleonic Wars and caused the Second National Bank to create inflationary policies. Those are actually causes of the Panic of 1819. They were not the effect of the Panic of 1819. So the international economy started declining following the Napoleonic Wars, and the Second National Bank was creating inflationary policies due to land speculation at this time. And both of these were causes of the Panic of 1819 in the United States, of this economic depression. And so the actual effect of that was that the labor movement was slow to develop. You saw a lot less... hold up, just 1 second. Now this is in full screen. I don't want this to be in full screen. I don't know how to get this out of full screen, because I can't see my notes, and that is not helpful. And I don't know how I did that. Let's see, come over here. Oh, please. Oh, please, dude. Please. Oh, no. Technical difficulties. Please stand by, you guys. I'm sorry. Why is that not working? I don't want to exit because I don't want to end the stream. View. Here we go. Yeah, I knew it was that button, but why was that not working? That's super frustrating. All right. Well, anyways. So the labor movement was slow to develop, and this was an effect of the Panic of 1819. And the reason behind this is that a lot of labor unrest emerged a lot later, such as wanting to limit work hours. That all happens in the 1830s and the 1840s, and wanting better pay and working conditions. That happens after the Panic of 1819. And because of this this economic depression, I guess, if you will, there's less money to be able to give out for workers, and so they can't be fighting for, like, better wages and better working conditions when the economy is not in such a great state. So that's the answer to that question. Panic of 1819, maybe take some notes on the effect, maybe note the causes here. And again, if I'm going too fast, you can always go back and watch the replay, which is going to go up about 24 hours. Usually, I try to make my best to put them up at about 24 hours after I actually have the live stream event, just so you guys know. So here is the next question we're going to go into. So the following are true about the textile mills of New England in the early 19th century, except, and one of those is not true. Find the one that is false. All right, so here we go. Let's talk about this question a little bit. So the question asks, the following are true about the textile mills of New England in the early 19th century, except So keep in mind that now we're moving towards textile mills. We're not moving towards that putting out system. We're moving towards this idea behind factories and things like that. So I talked about the putting out system being where it was products are developed in the homes. And so if we're talking about textile mills, which are factories and that kind of thing, they're not going to be made in homes. Therefore, the putting out system obviously would not be being used. And so that is the obvious correct answer there. But they did depend on water for power, these textile mills and factories. A large percentage of their workforce was made up of women. And there was this, finding my mouse cursor here, there was this idea of the Laval system, where they drew their workforce from young women in the surrounding areas, and they would work at the mills for a couple of years, and the factories and the workers, the employers, I should say, would provide dormitories for the women to stay in and things like that. And the wages were not very great, but the employment does give women this opportunity to have an income they might not otherwise have had. So that's also, that's good and things like that. And we talked about this actually in the last question, that there was little labor unrest in the mills until 1830s and 1840s. That's true. That was due to the Panic of 1819. You saw around those years, you saw wanting better wages, wanting better working conditions, and that kind of thing. So let's move on to the third question. Which of the following is a true statement about the Monroe Doctrine? Let me turn down the music here. Okay, so let's talk about this one a little bit. I think my water bottle's in the way, so I'll move that. Interesting. We went with all of the above. So which of the following statements is true about the Monroe Doctrine? The Monroe Doctrine was actually not issued in 1826. The date actually that it was issued was 1823. You might want to put that in your notes if you're wanting exact dates and things like that. So it was issued in 1823. And basically the reason behind why we passed the Monroe Doctrine is that in the early 1820s, President James Monroe and John Quincy Adams, who was the Secretary of State at the time, they became concerned that Spain and France, who were allied right now, would try and conquer Latin American republics that had gained advantage, that had worked hard to gain independence during the Napoleonic Wars. And the British were also on this same platform because they didn't want to lose their markets in South America. And so the British proposed that the United States would actually would jointly guarantee the sovereignty of the new Latin American states. And so then the Monroe Doctrine was passed because Monroe and John Adams, they were very reluctant to be seen acting with the British and things like that. So they issued the Monroe Doctrine in 1823, which said that the United States would resist new European colonization in the Western Hemisphere. So that's why this one is correct. So they would resist new European colonization, and it would be in the Western Hemisphere. But in return, the President Monroe would pledge that the United States would not interfere in all European affairs. So not just British affairs. All European affairs. So that's why this one is correct, because the phrasing is that it's all European affairs and not only British affairs. So this is incorrect, and it was issued in 1823 and not 1826. So therefore, it can't be all of the above. It has to be this option. So the Monroe Doctrine is very important. Make sure you take some notes on that and check it out in your AP review book. And so keep in mind, it was issued in 1823. It declared that the United States would resist new European colonization, and it said that the U.S. would not interfere in European affairs. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question here. President Monroe claimed that westward relocation of Native Americans would be advantageous to the Native Americans because, keep in mind your audience here, you're looking for something that would be advantageous to Native Americans. Alright, let's go ahead and talk about this question then. So President Monroe claimed that the westward relocation of Native Americans would be advantageous to the Native Americans for the following reasons. Let's talk about it. So the correct answer is they would not be bothered west of the Mississippi. But let's talk about why the other ones are incorrect real quick. First off, settlers west of the Mississippi, they were not receptive to Native American settlements there. That is not a true statement. They would be well compensated for the tribal lands they were leaving. That's not true. Obviously, as you note around this time, as Americans would keep pushing the Native Americans back further and further and further west, the Native Americans weren't gaining anything in return. America was just simply pushing them back and back off their land without getting anything, and we saw Native Americans revolting in that kind of thing. So, of course, they're not going to be well compensated for their land, so obviously that can't be the correct answer. The American military would protect them during their journey. That's not true either. The American military was not going to protect them. As you know, there's tension, obviously, between the Native Americans and the United States themselves, and so they're not going to try and protect them on their journey. But what they could guarantee was that they wouldn't be bothered west of the Mississippi. That was something they could guarantee, because at that time, the United States wasn't really past the Mississippi yet. At least as of yet. By the end of today's session, they will be past Mississippi, but for now, they are not yet. So let's go ahead and move on to the next question. Which of the following reform movements occurred between 1820 and 1845?
No effects face to face. That was.
All right, let's go ahead and talk about this one. So the question said, which of the following reform movements occurred between 1820 and 1845? First off, we should note that the Civil Rights Movement, if you were thinking, that is obviously not until the mid-20th century. So it, of course, is not going to be the Civil Rights Movement. The question is, did each of these remaining two happen between 1820 and 1845? And the answer is yes, they did. The Second Great Awakening was obviously a lot like the First Great Awakening in terms of the religious revival aspect of it. And it suggested a more personal and emotional approach towards traditional religion. And this ended up strengthening many Christian denominations, such as Baptist and Methodist. and it led to the creation of others, such as the Adventist movement. There were also revival meetings that occurred from this flourishing throughout the country, where someone would give a sermon and inspire congregants to engage in public conversations and speaking in tongues and that kind of thing. And the other thing that happened during now, that was also another reform movement, was, hold up, I can't find my cursor here. What is going on? Here we go. Was the abolitionist movement, also occurred during this time. So the abolitionist movement ended up becoming a major social and political force in the 1820s and 1830s. William Lloyd Garrison, if you're looking for people that were big in the abolitionist movement, he was a very vocal abolitionist, and he was the founder and editor of an abolitionist newspaper called The Liberator. And some abolitionists were opposing slavery because they believed it was sinful, and other abolitionists were motivated by the concerns of the perceived dangers of racial mixing and conflict in the United States. So keep in mind the abolitionist movement as well. So the Second Great Awakening and the abolitionist movement both were big movements that were occurring between 1820 and 1825, this type of reform. And keep in mind, the Second Great Awakening was more on the religious side, thinking about the more personal and emotional approach towards religion. The abolitionist movement being more somewhat focused on slavery and that kind of thing. Okay. Next question. Critics of Andrew Jackson would make all of the following claims except... All right, let's go ahead and talk about this question now. So critics of Andrew Jackson would make all of the following claims except, and so we're talking about looking things that Andrew Jackson was criticized for, as we know that there was a lot that Andrew Jackson was criticized for during his presidency. And so we're going to go ahead and talk about a lot of those things that he was criticized for. So let's go ahead and get started here by talking about those. Ones that he, let's target some of these. The kitchen cabinet was actually a thing. It was described as his most trusted political cronies, if you will. And so he would rely on those political cronies more so than the actual federal government that was employed. And so a lot of people didn't like Andrew Jackson for that reason. He didn't rely on advice from the government. He relied on advice from his little cohort, if you will. Critics did believe that he did give too much power to the presidency. He championed something called the spoils system, which was appointing loyal Democrats to positions in the federal government. So he was basically putting people that were loyal to him in positions of power. So that's just one example of how he abused the presidential power, but obviously there were a lot of others. That's just one, and we've got a limited amount of time, so I got to get through some of these others. And a lot of people did believe that he was a very common man, and targeted the common man, and therefore, because he targeted the common man, he was not fit to be president. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the next one. The concept of nullification became an issue when... we go. The concept of nullification became an issue when. So I think first we should talk about what nullification actually is. Okay. And so basically what's happening was Southern leaders, when there was a tariff that happened about 1828 called the Tariff of Abominations, and it was a very high. And so basically what's happening was Southern leaders and a lot of there was a tariff that happened about care for it. So South Carolina decided to try and nullify that. And so basically what's happening was, and so South Carolina said, hey, we would like to assert our right of nullification, which basically says that we can refuse to enforce federal laws if we believe they are unconstitutional. And so South Carolina, we would like to assert our right of this. So therefore, I think it was off the Georgia election if we believe. So therefore, it's obviously involving South Carolina. So South Carolina, so that rules out one red of this. The rest of therefore, I think it was off the Georgia and others. First off, Southern representatives switched their votes in 18. So South Carolina, so that rules out one red of this was not elected. Therefore, I think it was off and first off, Southern representatives. I guess more important, a better piece of evidence would be that if this is caused because of the tariff of 1828, that's a little bit outside our time period. I guess more important, a better piece of evidence would be that if down between blue and yellow because of the tariff of 1828, that's a little bit outside our time period. And I should say that right now, if you picked yellow because of the tariff of blue, blue is a bit confusing. When I say NA is any Native American, I should say that right now, if you picked yellow because of the tariff of blue, it limited the number of characters. When I say NA is any Native American, I should say that right now. So I wanted to type up Native Americans, but I wasn't able to. It limited the number of confusing. But it was not. They did not nullify congressional legislation concerning the use of Native Americans because they were okay. But it was not. They did not nullify congressional legislation concerning the use. So obviously, the answer is South Carolina nullified congressional bills. But it was not. They did not nullify congressional legislation concerning the use. So obviously, the answer is South Carolina nullified. And there was a famous debate in nullification in the U.S. Senate, known as the Webster debate, where Daniel Webster said that nullification allowed the Senate, the consequence would be, quote, state debate, dissevered, discordant, that belligerent on a land rent would be, quote, state debate, dissevered, discordant, belligerent. So President Jackson was one who supported states' rights, but he did not support discordant and very much belligerent. So President Jackson, so we kind of set up a little trap, but he did not after passing some new tariffs. So we kind of set up a little trap to nullify this legislation. Jackson did is he responded after passing preparing to send tariffs. So we kind of set up a little trap to nullify, and what Congress did is approve that by preparing to send tariffs, South Carolina allowed, which would give Jackson and power to go into South Carolina and enforce the rules. South Carolina allowed, which would give Jackson and power to go into and so because of that, South Carolina took back their and so nullification because of this idea, too high tariffs. South Carolina didn't want to abide by that. They believed it was unconstitutional. So nullification because of this idea, too high tariffs. South Carolina didn't want to abide by that. They believed it was unconstitutional. And so this next question is idea, too high tariffs. According to the concept of manifest destiny, there are four options. Have that idea, too high tariffs. According to the concept of manifest destiny, there are four options. Have that idea, too high tariffs. According to the concept of manifest destiny, there are four options. Have that idea, too high tariffs. According to the concept of manifest destiny, there are four options. Have that idea, too high tariffs. According to the concept of manifest destiny, there are four options. Have that idea, too high tariffs. According to the concept of manifest destiny, there are four options. Have that idea. Alright, let's go ahead and talk about this one. So, according to the concept of manifest destiny, so we're looking for a definition
let's go ahead and talk about
for manifest destiny. What was the big idea and the big overall arching concept behind
go ahead and talk
for manifest destiny? The big
idea behind that was that it was part concept. First off, this is most definitely the correct answer.
Big
The
idea
reason
behind
called
that
is that it was part America's First off, this is most definitely
to go out and
big idea behind that is that it was
that's the idea of manifest destiny. First off, the way they could go was to go out because they had a body of water to the east. That's the idea of manifest destiny. First off, the way they believed that it was their destiny to go out and conquer that land. That's the idea of manifest destiny. Far west is the way they believed that it was their destined to go out and conquer that land. Now it was, let's talk about there were, I guess, economic and political factors that maybe would cause. Now it was, let's talk about there were, I guess, economic and political factors that maybe. But that's not what manifest. Now it was the idea behind manifest destiny is that it was America's destiny. They had to fulfill that. But that's not what manifest. Now it was the idea behind manifest destiny. And again, overpopulation of Eastern forced westward expansion. That might have been a factor for why people wanted to move west, but that wasn't. And again, overpopulation of manifest expansion. That might have been a factor for why that manifest destiny west, but that wasn't. And again, overpopulation of that it was America's destiny. That might have been a factor for why that manifest destiny west, but that wasn't. Before we keep going, I think there are a couple things I want to talk about that I didn't make questions on, but I want to go back and address factors for why that manifest destiny west. Before we keep going, I think there are a couple things I want to talk about that I didn't make questions on. One of which was bank wars, and so President Jackson had another crisis during the Second Bank of the United States. One of which was he had economic policies called species, and so President Jackson required gold crisis for coins in order to purchase. One of which was he had this, and what ended up happening was actually contributed to the panic, and so President Jackson required gold and blend, and this was an economic depression that period he had this, and what ended up happening was actually contributed to the panic because of this required gold and blend, and this was an economic depression that period it caused, and what ended up happening was actually contributed to the panic because of this required gold and blend, and this was an economic depression that period it caused, and what ended up happening was actually he also because of withdrew federal money from the national bank and replaced the funds in state banks, which he would. He also because of withdrew federal money from his opponent's national bank and replaced the funds in state banks, and so because of all of this, it led to the bank war, and it led to and panic of 1837 state banks, and so because of all of this, and because so many people opposed Jackson his beliefs, a new political party emerged, and the political party because so many people opposed Jackson was mostly made up of people who were a new political party opposed Andrew Jackson because that was called Jackson was mostly made up of people who were and so we have political party opposed emerging Jackson political party that was the Whig party and the was mostly made up of people and the Democrats maintained that Jeffersonian kind of tradition limited government Whigs were more active government the Democrats maintained that Jeffersonian kind of tradition limited government Whigs were more active and the Democrats maintained that Jeffersonian government was fostering commerce industry with better market. The Democrats maintained that Democratic government was fostering commerce industry and with Whigs were more likely to favor reform legislation and fostering. These are all just policies of the Whig and Whigs were more land hungry and expansionist than the Democrats. These are all just policies. And the Whigs were a lot more cautious about this idea land hungry and expansionist than the Democrats. Okay, that's what the things wanted to. And the Whigs were a lot more before we led into manifest idea land hungry and expansionist than the Democrats. A little bit the manifest. Okay, that's what the things wanted to. And the Whigs were a lot more before we led into manifest idea land hungry and expansionist than the Democrats. A little bit. So now we can go ahead and okay, that's what the things wanted to. And the Whigs were a lot more before we led into manifest idea land hungry and expansionist than the Democrats. A little bit. So now we can go ahead and okay, that's what the things wanted. And the Whigs were a lot more before we led into. Don't give away questions. So I'm going to keep talking here. We're going to go ahead and keep moving on. So we should keep in mind Texas in the. We're going to go ahead and keep moving on. So because this American we should keep in mind out west, it ended up spreading in the. We're going to go ahead and Texas keep moving on. Who had just won its independence. So because this American we should keep in mind out west, it ended up spreading in the. We're going to go ahead and to note that the year who had just won its independence. So because this American we should keep in mind out west, it ended up spreading in the. We're going to go ahead and note the I guess the year who had just won its independence. So because this American we should keep in mind out west, but as they kept moving outwards, the Americans, I should say, by 1836, there were about 30,000 Americans settled. But as they kept moving outwards, the Americans, because by
by 1836, there were about 30,000 Spain wanted to, but as they kept moving, develop underpopulated the Americans because province, which there were a bunch of Americans settled, developed under Texas. But eventually, as this happened, Americans found themselves at odds. There was a bunch of Americans settled, and they got caught up with these Mexican political. But eventually, as this happened, and so most American settlers responded by revolting, and they got caught up with these Mexican political. They claimed independence. So most American settlers protected the Texas, and they got caught up. So they declared they eventually claimed independence from Mexico. Most American settlers protected the Texas, and it was called the Lone Star. They declared they eventually claimed independence from Mexico, and they wanted these Texans wanted to be annexed by the United States. They wanted to be a state, part of the United States. They wanted these Texans, but because of the issues with slavery and things like that, unfortunately, and the politics and the debate going on about slavery during this time, but because of the issues with slavery and things like that at that time, and it wasn't until 1844 when, but because of the issues and things like that at that time became, and it wasn't until the reason it was because in 1844 the president was John Tyler and his Secretary of State was John C. Calhoun. Obviously, they were both Southerners, so they made sure they could the president John Tyler and his into the Union States was John C. Calhoun. Obviously, they were both Southerners, so they made sure. All right, so I guess with that out of the way, move on to our next question. Go ahead. Obviously, they were both Southerners. All right, so I guess with that out of the way, the Mexican War was one of the causes for the debate over slavery. All right, so I guess with that out of the Mexican War was one of the causes for the debate over slavery. All right, so I guess with that out of the Mexican War was one of the causes for the debate over slavery. All right, so I guess with that out of the Mexican War was one of the causes. This is actually a true statement. The Mexican War was one of the causes for that debate over slavery. And the reason for that was because it's actually a true statement. The Mexican War was one of the causes from the Mexican War. And they had to do it's actually a true statement. Mexican War, so they got more land, and they had to figure out what they were going to do. They had to do and whether so they got more land, and they had to figure out slave state or a free state. They had to do and whether so obviously just they got more land, and they had to increase slave state or a free state. And whether so obviously just they got more land, so they had to no slave state or a free state on the United States. Or so obviously just they got a land, so they had no slave state to stay on the United States. Or so obviously just they got a land, so they had no slave state to stay on the United States. Or so obviously just they got a land, so they had no slave state to stay on the United States. I mean, I guess one thing more I can say is that it really caused a debate over slavery because we had declared, back when the Missouri Compromise occurred, we didn't know how far that line really go in debate over slavery because we had declared Senate line to Pacific. Back when the Missouri Compromise was not, and so how far that line really go. He attempted to make a compromise that declared Missouri Compromise. Back when the Missouri Compromise was not, and so how far that the American really go. He attempted to make a compromise that declared Missouri Compromise. But it very much did contribute to the debate over that the American really go. He attempted to make a compromise that declared Missouri Compromise. But it very much did multiple select questions, so you can select multiple correct answers on this one. Which of the following was a part of the compromise of 18? Multiple select questions, so you can select multiple correct answers on this one. Which of the following was a part of the compromise of 18? Multiple select questions, so you can select multiple correct answers on this one. Which of the following was a part of the compromise of 18? Multiple select questions, so you can select multiple correct answers on this one. Which of the following was a part of the compromise of 18? Multiple select questions, so you can select multiple correct answers on this one. Which of the following was a part of the compromise of 18? Multiple select questions, so you can select multiple correct answers on this one. Which of the following was a part of the compromise of 18? Multiple select questions, so you can select multiple correct answers on this one. Which of the following was a part of the compromise of 18? Multiple select questions, so you can select multiple correct answers on this one. All right, let's go ahead and talk about this one. So it ended up being that actually all four of those answers were correct. Let's go ahead and talk about why and talk about what was in each of those four answers. So one of them, one of the components was yes, California does enter as a free state. Were correct. Let's go ahead and talk about
So that's
why.
one of the answers.
All right.
So
One of them, one of the components was
yeah,
ended up
California
being that
does
actually
enter
all
as
four of
a,
those answers were correct. Let's go ahead and talk
So
about
that's
why.
one of the answers.
All right.
So
One of them, one of the components was ended up being that
does
actually
enter
all
as
four of
a,
those answers were correct. Let's go ahead and talk
So
about
that's
why.
one of the answers.
All right.
Okay,
One
there we
of
go.
them-
Okay,
one of the
so
components
California
was
enters
ended
as a
up
free
being that
state.
actually all
So
four of
California
those answers
joins the union as a free state.
So that's
Residents of New Mexico and Utah decide if they want
there we go.
slavery.
Okay,
California enters as a free state.
pretty
Poorly worded.
California
was that
joins the union as a free state.
if you lived in New Mexico or Utah,
residents
you
of New
could,
Mexico and Utah decide
those
if they want
populations
slavery.
could vote
Okay,
that was whether they
California
wanted
enters
to have
as a free
slavery
state.
in
California
their
joins the union as a free state.
If you lived in New Mexico or Utah,
therefore,
you
residents of
could
New Mexico and Utah decide
those
if they want
populations
slavery.
could vote
Okay, that was
whether they
California
wanted to have
enters as a
slavery
free state.
in definitely not New Mexico and below that 36.
If you lived in New Mexico,
but they could
therefore
therefore
residents
decide
of New
whether they
Mexico
wanted
and
to
Utah
have
those
those
populations
populations
could
could
vote.
vote.
And then a couple smaller points that maybe you didn't know about below.
If you lived in New Mexico,
but they therefore decided
no, some of them. Okay, that's why we take notes.
And then a couple smaller points that
What it ended the slave trading district, the District of Columbia. No, the District of Columbia in Washington D.C. It killed the slave trade there. It ended the slave trading district, the District of Columbia, which is a law that dealt with the returning and it killed the slave trade there. These are all big parts of compromise of 1850. Big ideas come from the law that dealt with I would know the ins and outs of compromise there. These are all big parts of compromise of 1850. Big ideas come from the law that dealt with I would know the ins and outs of compromise there. Rucking along here. Big ideas come from the law that dealt with I would know the ins and outs of compromise. It's another multi-select rucking along here. Big ideas come from the law that dealt with I would know the ins and outs of compromise. It's another multi-select rucking along here. Big ideas come from the law that dealt with I would know the ins and outs of compromise. It's another multi-select rucking along here. Big ideas come from the law that dealt with I would know the ins and outs of compromise. It's another multi-select along here. Alright. So we're just following a strip of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, multiple answers. We see that there is an everything all of the above answers. Alright. So we're following a strip of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, false answers. We see that and we actually can't eliminate one of false. Alright. Not signed into law under Andrew Jackson. False answers. Pull up my notes. And we actually can't eliminate one of false. Alright. Not signed into law under Andrew Jackson. False answers. Pull up my notes. But the Kansas-Nebraska Act was enacted in 1854, which is not at all under the reign of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Therefore, that one's incorrect. All the options are incorrect. But the other two options are, first off, we should say what it did. It basically allowed the residents of Nebraska, but the other two options would be able to choose whether they wanted slavery within their state. Those populations basically allowed slavery within their states, just like New Mexico. The other two options would be able to choose whether they wanted slavery within their states. That people would move into Kansas on purpose to try and influence the votes. People would move into Kansas North heavy, therefore on purpose to try and influence the votes. Also trying to influence that people raise population into North heavy to try and increase the South population and influence the votes. And this ended up leading to try and prevent population into Kansas, which talks about all of the violation that occurred. And this ended up leading to the decision of people to prevent population into Kansas, which talks about all of the violation that occurred. And this ended up leading to the decision. So, yep, that is the idea behind the Kansas
Nebraska Act, which allowed all the Nebraska states to who they wanted slavery in their state, just like the Mexican colony. So, yep, that is the idea about the Nebraska Act, which allowed all the Nebraska states to who Kansas slavery in their state, just like the Mexican colony. So, yep, that is the idea about the Nebraska Act, which allowed all the Nebraska states to who Kansas slavery in their state, just like the Mexican colony. So, yep, that is the idea about the Nebraska Act, allowed. I'll go ahead and check it out. We're talking about the presidential election, just like the Mexican colony. So, yep, that is the idea about the Nebraska Act, allowed. I'll go ahead and check it out. We're talking about the presidential election, just like the Mexican colony. So, yep, that's the idea about the Nebraska Act, allowed. I'll go ahead and check it out. We're talking about the presidential election, just like the Mexican colony. So, yep, that's the idea about the Nebraska Act, allowed. I'll go ahead and check it out. We're talking about the presidential election. Okay, let's talk about this one. During the presidential election of 1860, all these statements are actually true. The Democratic Party ends up getting split, and so during this presidential election, they decide all these statements are actually true. The Democratic Party ends up getting the new president was someone who pretty much no one South voted for. If you actually think about who actually the Democratic Party ends up the election, the new president was someone who pretty much no one South voted for. That was it was Abraham Lincoln. And the new president if you read the title of this book, it was a Southern nightmare come true. That was because he won that election, and including if you read the title of this book, it was a Southern nightmare come true. That was all because he won that election, and which means no one had a larger population voted for the South. All because he won that election, and which means no one had a larger population. I actually don't know the figures off my head, so they thought that the South was more popular. Keep in mind that slavery no one had a larger right, and so I actually don't know the figures off my head. So when we look at the core symmetrical population, we're not keep in mind that slavery no one had a right north, and so I actually don't know the figures that were able to vote. When we look at the core symmetrical population, we're not keep in mind. And obviously the future of slavery was a huge issue now above all, especially because the following year is the start of slavery. And obviously the future of slavery was a the next one we get to now jump right into the Civil War following year. But keep in mind that not pretty soon after here you can the next one we get to jump right into the Civil War following year. But keep in mind that really not pretty soon after here you can the next one we get to jump right into the Civil War following year. War, which I'm going to go ahead and talk about here, the next day, jump right into after the creation of the Confederate States of America, war, which I'm going to go ahead and talk about here. There was actually not an immediate rush for states after the creation of the Confederate States of Upper South, war, which I'm going to go ahead and talk about here. There was actually not an immediate rush for states after the creation of the Confederate States of Upper South, war, which I'm going to go ahead and talk about here. There was actually not an immediate rush for states after the creation of the Upper South, farther south. There was actually not an immediate rush for states not upper south, farther south. So it took a while for them to actually join the Confederate States of America, farther south. So it took a while for the leaders of the Confederacy were very confident that they had nothing to fear about their president. So it took a while, which was the leaders of the Confederacy were very confident that they had nothing to fear. They believed they had nothing to fear. President. It took a while, which Confederates occupied most federal installations in states. And in South Carolina, there were news that demanded that federal troops would evacuate. Confederates occupied most fortresses that were situated on the islands in State Harbor. And in South Carolina, there were news that demanded. But in January of 1861, Buchanan's attempted to resupply the fort by sending unarmed merchant South Carolina. There were Confederates. But in January of 1861, Buchanan's attempted to resupply the fort by sending supply route.
Unarmed merchants, South Carolina,
and
the
Confederates.
But basically, this is all just tension, trying to search for compromise among Confederate States of America and Confederates. But basically, this is all just tension, go ahead and let's talk about the opening strategies of the war. So Southerners, basically, this is all just defending the principal states' rights. Go ahead and let's talk about the opening strategy of the war and what drove that concern. Southerners, basically, this is all just the institution of slavery, rights. Obviously, the South had slavery. The opening strategy of the war, which was actually interesting when you consider the fact that actually the majority of people who lived in the South actually didn't own any slaves or owned, which was actually interesting when you consider the fact that actually the majority of people who lived in the South. So let's go ahead and any slaves or owned, which is actually interesting when you consider the fact that actually the majority of people who lived in the South. So let's go ahead and question any slaves or owned. I think 4 questions remaining on the Civil War. They're all very important towards the Civil War. I think so. Let's go ahead and those questions will answer what I kind of want 4 questions remaining on the Civil War. They're all very important from the Civil War. So let's go ahead and I guess actually before I get there, I want to actually talk about the Emancipation Proclamation because I do know that I don't think any of my questions. I guess actually before I get there, I want to actually eventually President Lincoln's only goal, because I do know that I don't towards the Civil War was I guess actually before I he resisted an abolitionist appeal. Eventually, freeing slaves would cost the government support in those crucial border states. He resisted until the war dragged on. Eventually, freeing slavery cost the government was helping sustain those crucial border states. He resisted until the war dragged on. Eventually, so the important thing to take away from that is that originally the goal of the North was not the important slavery take away from it was that the goal of the North was to get the South back up part of the United States. Was not it had nothing to do with slavery. It wasn't for a long time before to get the South back up part of the United States. Was not being about it had nothing to do with slavery. It wasn't for a long time before to get the South back up part of the Emancipation Proclamation. Not being about it had nothing to do with slavery. Emancipation Proclamation goes into effect on the 1st of January and it completely changes the nature. Being about it had nothing to do with emancipation because what happens is after it gets passed, the focus on the North in regards to the war went from also included extending freedom as well. The focus on the North in regards to the war went from trying to get also included extending freedom as well. The focus on the North in regards to the war went from trying to get also included extending freedom as well. Focus on North. Obviously, Southerners were outraged by the Emancipation Proclamation because they obviously opposed slavery, so they don't want free slaves. Obviously, Southerners were outraged by the Emancipation Proclamation because the South did not really obviously opposed slavery, so they don't want free slaves. Okay, I think now with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and talk about these review questions because I think these 4 remaining review questions. I think now with that being said, what you need to know about these review questions because I think these go ahead and 4 remaining review questions. I think now with that being said, questions and then we'll go ahead and these review questions because I think these go ahead and 4 remaining review. Go ahead and check this out. Questions and then we'll go ahead and these review questions because I think these go ahead and 4 remaining review. Go ahead and check this out. So which advantage did the North not have? Review questions because I think these go ahead and 4 remaining review. Go ahead and check this out. So which advantage did the North not have? Review questions because I think these go ahead and 4 remaining review. Go ahead and check this out. So which advantage did the North not have? Review questions because I think these go ahead and 4 remaining review. Go ahead and check this out. So which advantage did the North not have? Right. Okay, let's talk about this. So we're looking for which one was not an advantage that the North had in at the beginning of the Civil War. And the North did not actually occupy more territory than the South. It actually occupied less territory. And when you think about it, a lot of those bigger states were those slave states. We're looking at Kentucky. We're looking at
Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, they occupied a lot more land than the North did. So that was a disadvantage that the North had about this, was that if the South wanted to win, was not an advantage. It would take them a shorter amount of time to take over the North, if you will, because there was less territory to conquer. And so that was a problem. But the North did have more railroad lines. The North had more factories. When you think about it, the South is very agricultural based. They were almost, in a sense, behind from the rest of the world because they were so focused with slavery. They were so focused on. They occupied a lot more land. They were so focused on the agricultural side and using slaves to speed up that process. And so they didn't have really many factories in the South. It would take them. The North had that advantage. They had more factories, and so they could produce these war goods at a quicker, more rapid rate. But the North did. We talked about this. The North had a larger population. We talked about that. The North had more factories. When you think the election of 1860, because remember, Abraham Lincoln was from the North. About it, and pretty much no one in the South voted for him, yet he still won. They were almost, in a sense, behind from the rest of the world because they were so focused with slavery. They were so focused. So those were all advantages that the North had in the Civil War. They were so focused on the agricultural side. And that was something you think about. Consider maybe what was an advantage that the South had. I can tell you right away, one big advantage that the South had in the Civil War was that they had extremely good military leadership. They had more factories, and so the Union went through. But the North did. We talked about that. The North had more factories and stuck with a good military leader. Election of 1860, because remember, Abraham Lincoln was from the North had a really great. Pretty much no one in the South voted for him, yet he still won. They were almost, in a sense, behind from the rest of the world. Next question: European states did not aid the Confederacy in the Civil War because they were so focused on the agricultural side. And that was something you think about. Consider maybe what was an advantage that the South had. I can tell you right away, one big advantage that the South had in the Civil War was that they had extremely good military leadership. They had more factories, so the Union went through. But the North did. We talked about that. The North had more factories and stuck with a good military leader. Election of 1860, because remember, Abraham Lincoln was from the North had it, and pretty much no one in the South voted for him, yet he still won. Almost, in a sense, behind from the rest of the world. Next question: European states did not aid the Confederacy in the Civil War because they were focused on the agricultural side. And that was something you think about. Consider advantages that the South had. I can tell you right away, one big advantage that the South had in the Civil War was that they had extremely good military leadership. They had more factories, so the Union went through. But the North did. We talked about that. The North had more factories and stuck with a good military leader. Election of 1860, remember? Whereas from the North had it, and pretty much no one in the South voted for him, yet he still won. Almost, in a sense, behind. All right, let's go ahead and talk about this question. Next question: European states did not aid the Confederacy because. Now let's keep in mind. Let's look at this first option actually. Look, there were alternative sources of cotton and other crops they could turn to. There were alternative sources that they could turn to. That didn't mean they wanted to turn to those other sources. Because, let's be perfectly honest, Britain and France very much liked the cotton, getting that cotton from the South. But the problem was that they had already outlawed slavery. Most of Europe had already outlawed slavery, and they didn't want to be seen from the rest of the world as supporting these people who wanted slavery. And so they didn't want to try and trade with them or help them when there were alternative sources that they could turn to. That didn't mean they wanted to turn to those other sources. And they didn't honestly do the Confederacy. Let's be perfectly honest. When you really look at it, Britain and France very much liked so many cotton, getting that cotton. No one really. But the problem was that, and obviously, they had already outlawed slavery. Most of Europe had already outlawed next question. Two more questions to go. The military draft was unpopular in the North. People who wanted slavery. And so they didn't want to try and trade with them or help them when there were alternative sources that they could turn to. That didn't mean they wanted to turn to those other sources. And they didn't honestly. It's kind of a hard question, honestly. When you really look at it, France very much liked the cotton, getting that cotton. No one really. But the problem was that, and obviously, they had already outlawed slavery. So, next question. Two more questions to go. The military draft was unpopular in the North because who wanted slavery. And so they didn't want to try and trade with them or help them when there were alternatives that they could turn to. That just means they wanted to turn to other sources. And they didn't honestly. It's kind of a hard question. When you really look at it, France very much liked the cotton, getting that cotton. No one really. more questions to go.
The military draft was unpopular in the North.
All right. So unfortunately, that was the time. There's the question. Interesting. We picked green and not yellow. So let's talk about this question. See what happened here.
And they didn't.
So why was the military draft unpopular? It was not because martial laws needed to enforce the military draft. There was no need to enforce laws. People were actively fighting in the war, and they did
More
have
questions to go. The military draft
there wasn't really a need for law. So unfortunately, that was to enforce people's time and to draft. Interesting, we picked green. But the big thing, the reason the North didn't like it is that the draft allowed the people who were drafted to hire replacements. And these replacements included Irish American immigrants, if they wanted to. And they also could include blacks that were free and living. So why was the military draft? So what enraged the North was that basically, if you had enough money, because if you were a business person or something like that, and you had enough money, you could effectively pay your way out of having to fight in the war. If you lived in the North. So you could pay for someone else to take your spot. Well, people in the North didn't really care for that. And so that's why the draft wasn't unfortunately that was to enforce. And the final question we have, the final time you're going to get to and they also could include music. Blacks that were free and living. Basically, if you had enough money, I think this is super good music. I listen to it while I study. I think it's awesome, and you guys should totally check it out. It's by Vincent Rubinetti, if you're interested. So Google search him, or search him on Spotify, or search him on YouTube. He makes cool music. You could to fight in the war. So anyway, go ahead and do our last question before we wrap up the stream. And well, people in the North didn't really care for that, and so that's what it was. Unfortunately, that was the force. And the final question we have is basically while I study, I think it's awesome. It's by Vincent Rubinetti, if you're in Spotify or search him on YouTube. He makes cool music. You could to fight in the war. It's question. Before we wrap up the stream. It's by Vincent Rubinetti. He makes cool music. You could to fight in the war. It's question. All right, there we go. So, let's talk about this final question. So the Battle of Vicksburg was an important victory for the Union because, and I'm not really going to talk about why the other ones were incorrect. Actually, it's a lie. I'm going to talk about green. General Lee could, in fact, be beaten. I think that the Union knew that General Lee could be beaten and that they could win the war, especially considering the fact that they had so many advantages. It's just that the Union didn't ever have a really good military leader for such a long time until really the end of the war. That they couldn't beat him because of that, in a sense. And so, let's talk about I mean, some could argue, could the Civil War have been over right away if they got their amazing military leader? And I'm not really going to talk about why the other ones were incorrect. Actually, it's a lie. Ended I'm going to talk about green quicker. It's an interesting argument, interesting debate to have. I think that. But the big key here is that it did give the Union virtual control, basically especially considering the fact that they had so many, and that river runs right down into southern territory, and so it makes it really easy for the North to be able to put troops on boats, put supplies on boats, and they couldn't quickly and efficiently get it right down to the south. I mean, some could argue, so that really was the turning point right away, and helped they got their amazing military. All right, so that is Blue Impala. Congratulations on your win. Thank you for having the courage to actually play. But the big key here is that it did give the Union. We don't really have many people in the live audience, but I do appreciate the fact that you and that river chose right down into southern territory. So military easy for the North to be able to put troops on boats, put that are watching the recording, I hope that you were still engaging.
Some could argue
so that really was
understood right away and help you got there.
Practicing these questions in time and things like that.
So that is Blue Impala.
Trying to get right answers. It's not
Thank you for having the
hope you're taking notes.
The big key here is that the exam, you don't really have many people in the live audience, but I do appreciate the fact that you in that river right.
But yeah, thank you. If you were here live, thanks for tuning in for however long you tuned in live. I really appreciate that.
Those of you that are watching,
I think we're gonna start doing more recordings. Definitely, I think I might try and do them every Saturday. But I will make posts about this on the Discord channel. Practicing these questions in the academic Discord channel.
So that is Blue Impala.
Training my YouTube channel. It's not with the schedule.
Thank you for having
but I might do
notes.
the live streaming here more often. I don't know. This might be the format that I end up choosing in that river. But yeah, thank you. If you were here live. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much.
Those of you that are watching,
I think we're starting to get live. Thank you for coming. Definitely practice with me. And next time we'll talk about reconstruction. But I will make posts about this next time I do Discord channel. Whether it's with my students or with my Discord channel.
So that is Blue Impala.
So thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you for having
But I might do notes live streaming more often. I don't know. This might be the format that I end, even though it's not. But yeah, thank you. If you were here live. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much.
Those of you that are watching,
I think we're going to do something. Whip up a little end screen and things like that. Here we go. Live come there. It's time to talk about reconstruction. But I do Discord channel. It's not fun. It's not that big a deal. But at least I can have an answer so much for talking But anyways, yeah. I don't know. Thank you guys so much for watching. And see you if you were here live. But anyways, thank you guys so much. Check out the channel. I support some APUSH webinars I've done, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye, guys. Live come there. It's time to talk about reconstruction. But I do Discord channel. It's not fun. It's not that big a deal. But at least I can have an answer so much for talking. But anyways, yeah. I don't know. Thank you guys so much for watching. And see you if you were here live. But anyways, thank you guys so much. Check out the channel. I support some APUSH webinars I've done, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye, guys. Live come there. It's time to talk about reconstruction. But I do Discord channel. It's not fun. It's not that big a deal. But at least I can have an answer so much.